January 17th, 1943, North Atlantic, 0300 hours. The winter storm raged with merciless intensity as convoy HX-224 fought its way through 20-foot swells. Aboard the lead destroyer, HMS Venomous, Lieutenant Commander James Blackwood pressed his binoculars harder against his face, desperately searching the dark horizon. The bitter cold had numbed his hands hours ago. His breath condensed into fog with each exhale. "Radio room reports another vessel down, sir," his first officer shouted over the howling wind. "That's 3 ships in the last hour." Blackwood nodded grimly. Somewhere in the darkness, a wolf pack of German U-boats was hunting them. Admiral Dönitz's submarines were executing their orders with devastating precision, communicating with each other and Berlin through encrypted radio transmissions that remained frustratingly indecipherable to Allied intelligence. Or so the Germans believed. Beneath his heavy coat, Blackwood carried a sealed envelope marked with the highest security classification. Inside was information so secret that even he didn't fully understand its origins. Intelligence about the precise locations of 3 U-boats directly in their path. The orders were explicit: alter course by 15 degrees north without providing any explanation to the convoy. The intelligence could not be acted upon too obviously. "Signal the convoy to execute course correction Alpha," Blackwood ordered. "Maintain radio silence." Within 30 minutes, the 47 merchant ships had adjusted their heading, slipping past the waiting U-boat ambush by less than 5 nautical miles. By dawn, convoy HX-224 sailed in calmer waters, its precious cargo of American tanks and aircraft parts still bound for Liverpool. Back in Berlin, German Naval High Command scrutinized the convoy's unexpected maneuver. Admiral Dönitz studied the maps with growing frustration. "Impossible," he muttered. "How could they have known?" The Admiral would never learn that a small group of mathematicians and engineers in a requisitioned English country estate had intercepted, decoded, and read his orders before they even reached his U-boat commanders. The Germans had absolute faith in their encryption machines, the supposedly unbreakable Enigma and Lorentz ciphers. It would prove to be their greatest miscalculation of the war. Bletchley Park, 50 miles northwest of London, appeared utterly unremarkable from the outside, a Victorian mansion surrounded by modest outbuildings. Yet behind its unassuming brick facade lay one of history's most consequential intelligence operations. Here, in prefabricated huts scattered across the estate grounds, thousands of men and women worked in shifts around the clock on the seemingly impossible task of breaking into the German military's most secure communications. The heart of Germany's encryption system was the Enigma machine, a device about the size of a portable typewriter with a keyboard, a lamp board, and a set of rotors that scrambled messages into unintelligible code. Each branch of the Wehrmacht used different versions, with the naval Enigma being the most complex, featuring 4 rotors instead of 3 and providing approximately 153 trillion possible encoding combinations. For high-level communications between Berlin and field commanders, the Germans employed an even more sophisticated system, the Lorenz SZ40 teleprinter cipher machine, codenamed Tunny by the British. The fundamental flaw in the German system wasn't mechanical, but human. Standard operating procedures required frequent changes of settings, careful safeguards, and strict adherence to security protocols. In practice, these measures were often compromised by the pressures of combat. Major Thomas Harrington, an American intelligence liaison officer assigned to Bletchley Park in 1942, documented the patterns of German error that emerged. Operators reused settings when under pressure. Messages were transmitted multiple times with only minor changes. Weather reports followed predictable formats, creating what cryptanalysts called cribs, known or guessed portions of plain text that could be mapped against the ciphertext. Most critically, The Germans maintained absolute faith in the mathematical impossibility of breaking their systems without possessing the actual encryption machines and daily settings. This confidence led to a fatal operational security vulnerability. They never seriously considered that their codes had been compromised, even when evidence suggested otherwise. On December 7, 1941, a German U-boat operator made a crucial mistake, transmitting the same message twice with only slight modifications, but using identical settings. The error allowed Bletchley Park cryptanalyst Alan Turing's team to identify the day's naval Enigma configuration. Within hours, the location of every U-boat in the Atlantic was known to Allied command. Yet the Germans conducted no security review. No investigation was launched. The fundamental pattern repeated throughout 1942 and 1943. Successful Allied convoy reroutings were attributed to radar improvements, air reconnaissance, or simple luck, never to the systematic compromise of Germany's most secure communications channels. The enemy's greatest vulnerability, Harrington wrote in his classified report, is his absolute conviction that his encryption remains unbroken. Warsaw, July 1939, 5 weeks before German tanks would cross the Polish border. In a nondescript government building, 3 Polish mathematicians, Marian Rejewski, Jerzy Rojicki, and Henryk Zygalski, carefully packed their equipment into wooden crates. For 7 years, they had been breaking German Enigma codes in one of cryptography's greatest unsung achievements. Now, with invasion imminent, they prepared to share their secrets with the British and French allies. Rejewski, the eldest of the 3 at 34, carefully wrapped a replica Enigma machine they had reconstructed through mathematical analysis alone, without ever having seen the actual German device. Next to it, he placed papers documenting their methods, including the mathematical formulas that had allowed them to reverse engineer the Enigma's wiring configuration. "Do you think they will understand the significance?" Zygalski asked quietly. "The British have excellent mathematicians," Rejewski replied, "but they've been approaching the problem from the wrong direction. This will give them years of advantage." On July 24th, at a secret meeting in the Kabaty Woods south of Warsaw, the Poles revealed their breakthrough to stunned representatives of British and French intelligence. Commander Alistair Denniston, head of Britain's Government Code and Cipher School, had arrived expecting little from the meeting. He departed with the keys to eventually breaking Germany's military communications. The Polish methods, though brilliant, were becoming less effective as the Germans enhanced Enigma security. But the principles Rejewski's team discovered, particularly their development of the Bomba Kryptologiczna, a proto-computer designed to test Enigma permutations, provided the crucial foundation for what would become the British bomb machines. After the meeting, the Polish cryptographers destroyed their remaining equipment and fled Warsaw. Rojicki would die in a Mediterranean shipwreck in 1942. Rejewski and Zygalski made their way to Britain, where they continued working on codes, but were never fully integrated into Bletchley Park's inner circle due to secrecy compartmentalization. At Bletchley, the knowledge transfer from the Polish cryptographers proved invaluable. Dilwyn "Dilly" Knox, one of Britain's leading cryptanalysts, immediately recognized the significance of the Polish techniques. "Oh, we've been trying to force a door that was already mathematically unlocked by the Poles," he told his colleagues. Alan Turing, who arrived at Bletchley in September 1939, built upon the Polish foundation, but took a fundamentally different approach to mechanizing the code-breaking process. Where the Polish bomber had been designed around specific German procedures that were eventually changed, Turing's bomb was more flexible, capable of adapting to new enemy security measures. By early 1940, the first British bomb was operational in Hut 1 at Bletchley Park. Measuring 6 feet tall, 7 feet wide, and 2 feet deep, it contained a complex array of rotating drums and electrical circuits that simulated multiple Enigma machines operating simultaneously. The device could test 17,576 possible Enigma wheel positions in approximately 20 minutes, a task that would have taken human cryptanalysts years. The Polish contribution remained one of the war's most closely guarded secrets, deliberately minimized in post-war accounts to protect ongoing intelligence operations. Yet, as historian Sir Harry Hinsley later observed, the British breakthrough would have been delayed by at least a year, perhaps two, without the Polish work. In that time, the course of the war might have been irreversibly altered. Alan Turing stood in the cold March rain outside Hut 8, smoking a cigarette despite the downpour. The mathematician's disheveled appearance, rumpled clothing, uncombed hair, fingers stained with ink, belied his disciplined mind. For months, he had been focused on a seemingly insurmountable problem: how to mechanize the decryption process to keep pace with the volume of intercepted German messages. The manual methods were too slow. By the time a message was decrypted, the intelligence it contained was often useless. Convoys had already been attacked, troops repositioned, opportunities lost. What Turing envisioned was not just a machine to help break codes, but a systematic approach that could industrialize the entire decryption operation. Inside the hut, Turing sketched his concept on a chalkboard for Gordon Welchman, another Cambridge mathematician. "And the Germans are using machines to encrypt," Turing said. "We need machines to decrypt." What he proposed was revolutionary, an electromechanical device later called the bomb, designed to rapidly test possible Enigma settings until it found likely matches. Each machine would stand over 6 feet tall, weigh a ton, and contain miles of intricate wiring, connecting rows of rotating drums. The concept evolved from earlier work by Polish cryptographers, but Turing's design represented a significant advance. The risk was enormous. Building the bombs would require immense resources during wartime shortages. The project would need to remain absolutely secret. If the Germans discovered the effort, they would immediately change their encryption systems, rendering the entire project worthless. Most challenging of all, there was no guarantee the machines would work. At Dollis Hill Research Station in northwest London, Post Office engineer Tommy Flowers confronted an even more audacious challenge. The Lorenz messages, Hitler's direct communications with his generals, remained largely unreadable despite mathematician Bill Tutt's theoretical breakthrough in understanding the cipher's structure. Flowers proposed building a machine that would use vacuum tubes, over 1,800 of them, to process data at unprecedented speeds. His superiors were skeptical. Vacuum tubes were notoriously unreliable. Conventional wisdom held that any machine with so many valves would fail constantly. But Flowers persisted, often working through the night in his small workshop, personally soldering connections while chain-smoking woodbines. "The entire system must be stable enough to run for days without failure," he explained to his team. "The circuits must remain powered continuously, no switching on and off. The thermionic valves will last longer that way." Each night, Flowers returned home to his wife Eileen without being able to tell her what he was building or why. The pressure was immense. Thousands of Allied lives hung in the balance, dependent on a machine that existed only in his imagination. By December 1943, Flowers had completed the first Colossus, the world's first programmable electronic computer. It was moved in utmost secrecy to Bletchley Park, where it was installed in a specially constructed facility known as Block H. The machine's true purpose remained so classified that most workers at Bletchley Park itself had no knowledge of its existence. June 3, 1944, Southwick House, Portsmouth, Allied Supreme Headquarters. General Dwight D. Eisenhower paced the operations room floor, his face lined with exhaustion. Around him, senior commanders studied weather maps and intelligence reports. The largest amphibious invasion in history, Operation Overlord, was scheduled to launch in less than 48 hours. Over 150,000 men waited on transport ships along Britain's southern coast. The fate of the war rested on the success or failure of this single operation. "What's the latest from Bletchley?" Eisenhower asked his intelligence chief. Major General Kenneth Strong placed a red folder on the table. Inside were decrypts of German high command communications from the previous 24 hours, messages sent between Hitler and Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, encoded on the Lorenz SZ-42 cipher machine, intercepted by British Y-service radio operators and broken by Colossus at Bletchley Park. The intelligence was astonishing in its detail and scope. The decrypts revealed that the German 15th Army remained positioned at Pas-de-Calais, convinced that the main Allied landing would come there rather than Normandy. Hitler himself had reinforced this conviction, ordering panzer divisions to remain in reserve near Calais. Most critically, the Germans had no knowledge of the actual invasion target or timing. "They're still in the dark," Strong confirmed. "The deception is holding." The invasion proceeded at dawn on June 6th. As Allied forces secured the Normandy beaches, Bletchley Park maintained round-the-clock monitoring of German communications. The Colossus machines, by then there were several, processed intercepted messages with unprecedented speed, reducing decryption time from weeks to hours. At Block H, Women's Royal Naval Service officer Jean Valentine fed perforated tape into Colossus Mark II, carefully monitoring the machine's rhythmic clicking as it searched for patterns in the intercepted cipher. When the machine found a match, lights flashed on the control panel. Valentine's trained eye could spot meaningful sequences in the endless stream of letters appearing on the printer. "We have Field Marshal Rommel's response," she called to her supervisor. The message was rushed to intelligence officers, who quickly determined that Rommel was ordering the 12th SS Panzer Division to counterattack at Caen. Within 30 minutes, the intelligence reached Allied headquarters. Royal Air Force bombers were redirected to target the Panzer Division's assembly areas before they could deploy. When the German tanks finally moved toward Allied positions, they encountered well-prepared defenses exactly where they had planned to attack. By July 1944, the Allies were breaking nearly 90% of intercepted high-level German communications within hours of transmission. German commanders, unable to explain the Allies' consistent ability to anticipate their movements, increasingly suspected treachery within their own ranks. Several officers were investigated for treason. Hitler became increasingly paranoid, dismissing experienced generals and taking direct control of tactical decisions. Not once did the Germans seriously consider that their encryption systems had been compromised. The Enigma and Lorenz machines remained in service until the final days of the war, continuously providing the Allies with Germany's most closely guarded secrets. Berlin, May 7, 1945. The unconditional surrender of all German forces was signed at 02:41 hours. World War II in Europe had ended. As the victorious Allies occupied Germany, specialized intelligence units followed closely behind the front lines. Their mission, to capture intact Enigma and Lorenz machines, technical documentation, and operating procedures before they could be destroyed. These teams, operating under the codename Operation TICOM, Target Intelligence Committee, worked with remarkable efficiency. The Germans still had no knowledge that their most secure communications had been systematically compromised for years. When questioned about encryption security, captured signals officers expressed complete confidence in their systems. One Luftwaffe communications chief insisted that properly operated Enigma machines produced mathematically unbreakable codes. At Bletchley Park, the work didn't stop with Germany's surrender. Attention shifted to Japanese codes, which had been broken separately by American cryptanalysts. But even as the war concluded, the secret of ultra-intelligence, the code name for all decrypted Axis communications, remained zealously guarded. Winston Churchill ordered the destruction of the Colossus machines. 8 of the 10 colossi were dismantled, their components returned to the post office or scrapped. The bombs met a similar fate. Technical documentation was burned. The thousands of men and women who had worked at Bletchley Park signed lifetime secrecy agreements, forbidden from discussing their contributions even with family members. For nearly 3 decades, their achievements remained unknown. The public narrative of the war made no mention of broken codes or signals intelligence. The critical role played by Bletchley Park in shortening the conflict by an estimated 2 to 4 years, potentially saving millions of lives, was absent from history books. The secrecy extended to the codebreakers themselves. Tommy Flowers, who had spent personal funds on components for the first Colossus, was denied recognition and financial recompense. Alan Turing, whose theoretical work had transformed cryptanalysis and laid the foundations for computer science, received no public acknowledgement. Many veterans of Bletchley Park returned to civilian life, carrying the burden of a secret they could not share, even as they watched incomplete or inaccurate histories of the war being written. In July 1974, former RAF officer F.W. Winterbotham published The Ultra Secret, the first authorized account of the Bletchley Park operation. The book revealed that throughout the war, Allied leaders had access to Adolf Hitler's most secret communications. The full extent of the achievement only gradually emerged through declassified documents and the accounts of aging veterans finally permitted to tell their stories. The legacy extended far beyond military victory. Turing's theoretical work laid the foundation for modern computing. Flowers' Colossus, the first programmable electronic digital computer, presaged the information revolution that would transform human society in the decades to come. Perhaps most significantly, the ultra-secret demonstrated the power of human ingenuity against seemingly impossible odds. How mathematicians, engineers, linguists, and thousands of supporting personnel working in quiet dedication had defeated encryption systems that their creators believed unbreakable. After-action analysis by the Joint Chiefs of Staff concluded, without Ultra, the war in Europe would have continued until at least 1946, possibly longer. No intelligence operation in military history has had a more decisive impact on battlefield outcomes. The Germans never knew the Allies were listening. That was the greatest secret of World War II.